Well, folks, we all knew it could happen. Against all odds, all expectations, and maybe even against the very fabric of reality itself, Donald J. Trump returned to the Oval Office. It was like a bad sequel nobody asked for, but here we are. And as always with Trump, the first 100 days were a roller coaster of chaos and controversy. Buckle up, because we're diving deep into the beginning of Trump's second term. We'll examine the economic turmoil, the eyebrow-raising pardons, and the worrying trends in environmental and immigration policies. Now, anyone who's been paying even the slightest bit of attention knows that the first 100 days of any presidency are crucial. It sets the tone, establishes priorities, and gives us a taste of what's to come. With Trump, well, let's just say the stakes were even higher. After the, shall we say, unconventional nature of his first term, the world was watching closely to see what a second Trump administration would bring. Would he have learned from his past mistakes? Would he tone down the rhetoric and focus on uniting a deeply divided nation? Spoiler alert, not really, no. Instead, what we got was a greatest hits compilation of Trumpian governance. Tariffs? You bet. Controversial pardons? Oh, you better believe it. Attacks on the free press? It wouldn't be a Trump presidency without them. It was almost comforting in its predictability, like a warm glass of milk spiked with enough Adderall to fuel a small nation. So let's break down the opening act of Trump's second term, shall we? Hold on to your hats, folks, because it's going to be a bumpy ride. One of the cornerstones of Trump's political identity has always been his self-proclaimed prowess as a businessman. He promised to run America like a business, and boy, did he ever. Unfortunately, the business he seemed to be modeling it after was one constantly on the verge of bankruptcy, fueled by risky gambles and questionable accounting practices. His signature economic policy, the tariffs, made a triumphant return, sending shockwaves through global markets. The idea behind tariffs is simple, at least on the surface. You slap a tax on goods coming in from other countries, making them more expensive, and theoretically, that encourages people to buy American-made products. Of course, in the real world, things are rarely that simple. The tariffs ended up hurting American consumers the most, driving up the price of everyday goods. Remember when you could buy a dozen eggs without needing a small loan? Yeah, those days seem like a distant sepia-tone memory now. Meanwhile, on Wall Street, the markets reacted to Trump's economic policies with all the enthusiasm of a teenager being forced to listen to their dad's favorite polka music. The stock market, which had been enjoying a period of relative stability, took a nosedive, leaving investors sweating and clutching their wallets with white-knuckled terror. The trade war with China, reignited with the fervor of 1,000 suns, only added fuel to the fire. Trump, of course, remained unfazed. He continued to tout the strength of the economy, pointing to cherry-picked statistics and dismissing any negative news as fake news, peddled by the enemy of the people, also known as the free press. But for everyday Americans struggling to make ends meet, the reality was far different. Trump's penchant for executive orders is well documented. He seemed to view the whole process of actually working with Congress as an inconvenient formality, like having to wear pants to a Zoom meeting. Why bother with all that messy negotiation and compromise when you could just sign a piece of paper and make it law? Well, not quite law, but you get the idea. In his first 100 days back in office, Trump unleashed a flurry of executive orders, each one more audacious than the last. He rolled back environmental regulations, claiming they were stifling economic growth, even though most economists would tell you that protecting the environment and growing the economy aren't mutually exclusive concepts. He tightened restrictions on immigration, making it even harder for people to seek asylum in the United States, seemingly forgetting that the whole "give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses" thing was kind of our whole deal. And then, there were the pardons. Oh, the pardons. Trump had a knack for issuing pardons that ranged from head-scratchingly bizarre to downright offensive. He pardoned political allies, celebrities who had fallen from grace, and even a few people who had probably never heard of him before but were no doubt very grateful for the presidential intervention in their legal troubles. But the most controversial pardon of all came on the eve of the one-year anniversary of the January 6th insurrection. In a move that shocked even his most ardent supporters, Trump granted a blanket pardon to everyone involved in the attack on the Capitol. He called them patriots who were fighting for their country, seemingly forgetting that their country was a democracy, and storming the seat of government to overturn the results of a free and fair election was generally frowned upon in a democracy. Now you might be thinking, wow, this all sounds pretty bleak. Was there anything remotely positive that happened in Trump's first 100 days? And to that, I would say, well, the sun rose every morning, which is always nice. But in all seriousness, there were a few glimmers of hope amidst the dumpster fire. For one thing, the public seemed to be growing weary of Trump's antics. His approval ratings, which had always been historically low for a president, continued to plummet. It seemed that even some of his most die-hard supporters were starting to question their loyalty. On the environmental front, while Trump was busy rolling back regulations at the federal level, many states and cities doubled down on their commitments to fighting climate change. They implemented their own stricter environmental policies, proving that even in the face of federal inaction, progress was still possible. And in the realm of immigration, while the Biden administration's efforts to create a more humane and compassionate immigration system were met with fierce resistance from Republicans in Congress, there was a groundswell of support from activists, faith leaders, and ordinary citizens who refused to turn a blind eye to the plight of immigrants and refugees. They organized protests, provided legal aid to immigrants facing deportation, and worked tirelessly to reunite families that had been torn apart by Trump's cruel and inhumane policies. So there you have it, folks. The first 100 days of Trump's second term were a wild ride, full of highs and lows, triumphs and tragedies. But through it all, one thing remained constant: the importance of independent journalism. In an era of misinformation and disinformation, when the very concept of truth itself is under attack, it is more important than ever to have a free and independent press that can hold those in power accountable. So keep reading, keep questioning, and keep fighting for the truth, because in the words of the late, great journalist Edward R. Murrow, good night and good luck.